What's up, folks? Wes Pruitt, 4 Star Sports Media. You are at the Sports Buffet to get full on a Friday morning. It's 9:21. We're going to be talking Great American Conference. Going to be talking American Athletic Conference. Going to be talking the SEC. Also going to be talking some MLB and NFL as well. All that and more today on the Sports Buffet, right here on the 4 Star Sports Media Network. Let's get into it. All right, so let's get started with some great American Conference talk, some GAC talk, as we would see the Harding Bison absolutely run past the University of Arkansas Monticello Bowl Weevils last night, 63-3, 63-3, as Harding would score 35 points in the first quarter of the game, with Andrew Miller rushing for 2 touchdowns and 78 yards, and Blake De La Cruz adding a 33-yard touchdown run. Also, Braden Jay had a 37-yard touchdown rush as well. Harding's offense amassed 443 yards on the ground. I'll say that again, 443 yards on the ground. 7 players scoring touchdowns. Cole Keelan also threw for 145 yards and 2 touchdowns. By the way, he had 3 completions, 2 of which were for points. Arkansas Monticello, which is now 2-1, managed to rush for 104 yards and 87 yards passing. And Demillion Brown, who I'm telling you folks, if you haven't checked this young man out now, you go watch last night. It's going to be, he did struggle a little bit, but he was 9 of 20. He did throw 3 picks last night. But this young man is a talent. He can play. A lot of fun to watch. The 60-point margin marked the largest in the 59-game series between the two programs. Harding, who is ranked number 1 in the AFCA D2 coaches poll, looks to continue its streak next Saturday against Henderson State at First Security Stadium. Now, for those of you not aware, Harding has now tied the Arkansas collegiate record for most consecutive wins at 22, which was set by the University of Arkansas between the seasons of 1963 and 1965. Also, the Bison's 35-point first quarter was their highest scoring quarter this season, and in the second against Southeastern Oklahoma in 2016. So they've now scored 35 points twice in program record. So when you look at the weekend slate of games, a lot of games. You've got Southern Arkansas University going against the Ouachita Baptist team. Both teams are 2-0 on the season. Going to be a lot of fun watching those two teams battle it out. You've got Arkansas Tech takes on Henderson State. That's going to be a good ball game. 6:00. Last year, Henderson State won 27-24. Like I said, Southern Arkansas and Ouachita Baptist. First time Ouachita has been to Southern Arkansas and Magnolia, which is where they played. First time they traveled to Magnolia since 2013. And then when you look at the standings, obviously Harding, these are current standings as of this morning. Harding's 3-0. They've scored 181 points on the season, only allowed 10. They're 1-0 at home, 2-0 away from Harding, and they've also won 22 games dating back to 2022. They are number 1 in the D2 program. Number 16, number 17, depending on what poll you look at. Ouachita Baptist comes in 2-0, 98 points scored in the season, only 5 allowed. They're 1-0 at home and away, and they've won 2 straight. Number 20 or number 17, 20, however you want to look at it, Henderson State comes in sitting at 3rd. They are also 2-0, scored 75 points, allowed 34 points, 1-0, both home and away from Arkadelphia. Southern Arkansas, just the team I was just talking about, taking on Ouachita this week. They're also 2-0. They've scored 64 points. They've allowed 51 on the season, 1-0 both home and away. And they have won 6 straight dating back to last season. Arkansas Tech, the Wonder Boys, are 2-0, 70 points scored on the season, 47 points allowed. Both 1-0, obviously, again, one home, one and away. And now Arkansas Monticello is 2-1. They've now updated stats here. They've scored 76 total points. They've allowed 98. They're 1-1 at home now with the loss last night, and then now they're 1-0 on the road. So big time ball games, man. A lot of fun when you look at all these teams. But you look at last night, like I said, Harding, if you watch this football team, I love watching them offensively. They run the triple option. They're probably the most efficient and effective team I've seen in my lifetime at running this offense. I mean, it is, the guy said last night on the radio broadcast or on the Monticello broadcast, it was boring to watch from the stands. I don't find it boring at all. That's just me. But, like I said, the Great American Conference, a lot of really good football in this conference. Yes, it's D2. I understand that. But incredible football being played in the Great American Conference right now by a lot of football teams. And one of those is the number one team in the nation and defending national champion, Harding Bison. Like I said, they ran past the Boll Weevils last night of Monticello 63-3 with 443 yards on the ground. And their quarterback threw 3 passes, 2 of which were for touchdowns. So, big time stuff out of the Great American Conference. Let's go ahead and jump over to the national side of things. Last night's game, South Alabama would get the win 48-14 on the road at App State. Let's just look into some stats real quick while we wait on our guest to come on. Total yards, South Alabama had 474. They had 320 on the ground last night, 154 through the air. When you look at App State, they had 266 through the air, 119 on the ground. Third down conversions, y'all know it's one of the first places I look. When you look at South Alabama, they were 6 for 10. Look at App State, they were 4 of 13. In addition, on fourth downs, South Alabama was 1-1, and App State was 0-2. They were pretty even on plays. Both teams ran roughly 65 to 70 plays, as App State would run 68, while South Alabama would run 67. Average yards per play, big difference here. 7.1 for South Alabama and 5.7 for App State. 7.4 per rush compared to 4.3. Time possession, 34 minutes and 12 seconds for South Alabama compared to 25 minutes, 48 seconds for App State. Big time win for South Alabama, and a good football team. A really, really good football team that is a team to look out for. They just scored over 80 points last week, and then they got another big win last night. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to bring our guest in here to talk a little Navy football, as Memphis and Navy will take on each other this upcoming Saturday in a big-time American Athletic Conference. Welcome back to Sports Buffet, Friday morning edition. We are welcomed by Mike James. Mike, appreciate you coming on this morning.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Not a problem. So, Mike, right now, when you look at Navy football, they're 2-0. You know all this information, I know. But they're 2-0 for just the third time in the last – I'm sorry. Am I correct on that? 2-0 for what, the third time in the last 30 years? Is that right?
I don't know if it's that, but it's definitely the first time since 2019, so it's been a while.
When you look at head coach Brian Newberry, what's your thoughts on him and how he's moving this program forward out of a long tenure from the previous coach?
So it's kind of interesting because usually when you move on from a coach that long, you kind of get a clean slate. But that wasn't the case with Newberry. He was already the defensive coordinator, and so culturally, I think that the team is very very similar. I think where the on field product has kind of suffered has been on offense. And that's where the biggest change has come this year with the new offensive coordinator, Drew Cronick.
Well, I tell you, Army's scoring points. I'm sorry, Navy is scoring. Definitely not Army. Navy is scoring points, and they're putting points up in a hurry. They score very quickly on the first play of the drive as well. That's going to be a challenge, I think, for this Memphis defense this week. But typically when you look at Navy, but they're averaging 142 yards passing a game, which is very unlike the Navy that we've seen in previous.
Yeah, it is. So Drew Cronick's background is in wing T football. And if he likes to throw it a little bit. One of the challenges that Navy had when it came to throwing the ball, it's not that they didn't throw the ball, it's just that most of their passing was always play action. And over the last few years, as the offense, they've struggled to run the option. Play action wasn't particularly effective because no one was respecting the option as much. With the new offense, what they really had to do was find ways to throw the ball that weren't so reliant on play action. And I think we've seen some of that in Cronick's offense, and I think it's actually helped the running game some to make it a more not necessarily more balanced, but you have to respect the threat either way.
You do, and I actually recently spoke about that on a podcast, breaking this game down. Is that you have to really, you have to be able to herd the quarterback, because if you don't, he's going to hurt you, and he can hurt you in multiple ways, both running the ball and definitely passing the ball as well. When you look at this Navy defense and you look at them facing a multiverse, multi-weaponed Memphis offense, what do you think this team's going to do from a defensive perspective this week to try to slow down the Tigers?
It's interesting if you look back at the history of this series and really over the last few years, anything that Navy has tried hasn't really worked. I think if you can pressure Hennigan, you can get him to make some mistakes, but that's a lot easier said than done, especially now when you're looking at an offensive line that has three starters coming back. They're all like seniors and redshirt juniors on down the board. You're not going to confuse these guys. These are experienced guys. So last year, Navy kind of backed off a little bit, and I think they were effective at keeping Hennigan from hurting him. He only had 210 yards passing, but Blake Watson ran for 169 yards and like 17 yards a carry. The year before that, they came after Hennigan a little bit. They sacked him 4 times, but it resulted in big plays, and which really made the difference in the game. So it's kind of a pick your poison situation for the defense. In general, they're kind of a run first focused unit. And if you look at Memphis, like if you look at Memphis last year, they lost 3 games, and they just happened to be the 3 games where they ran for less than 100 yards and averaged less than 3 yards per carry. So I think, excuse
Yeah.
me, I think they'll want to stop the run, but that's when you're looking at a unit that has a quarterback like Hennigan, you have guys like Rock Taylor to throw to. I don't there's no good answer. It's really just going to be managing the moment, I think, for the Navy defense.
I think you're exactly right. I think you're exactly right when you look around the country defensively nowadays, is that you've got to really just take the opportunity in front of you, aka that play, and try to make the most out of it.
Yeah.
Because these offenses are very, very convoluted now. They're very just. I mean, they're just. There's a lot going on, and they're looking at numerous things, as you know. So, Mike, tell us a little bit about what you do, how you cover Navy, and all that.
So I cover Navy. I'm the owner of the Mid Report, which is covers Navy on for Rivals.com. I'm also on Twitter at Navy Bird Dog.
Very nice. So, what are some things about covering this Navy football team that are probably a lot different than all other universities around the country?
It's what's kind of interesting is that it's not on the surface, it's not as different as you might think. Um, where the real difference is, like, say, an example for recruiting, um, you're just dealing with a lot more. So Navy doesn't have scholarships. It's a non-scholarship program in the sense that everyone at the school is on scholarship. So Navy recruiting classes might be 60, 70 guys. So just the bulk of what you're covering is a lot bigger. And I think there's a lot of, when you're covering Navy, I think you have to kind of explain service academies to people a lot, because there's a lot of things, whether it's with academics or the military side of things, that people don't necessarily understand. So when you cover it, you kind of have to explain things, lay out the lay of the land a little bit before you get into what you really want to talk about, because a lot of people aren't familiar with kind of the unique nature of a military school.
That's a great point. That's an incredible point. So when you talk about that and the service academies, I, personally, I really hope that the American can bring Air Force in. I think you bring Air Force, Army, and Navy all in the American. I mean that it doesn't fit much better than that, right, Mike?
So it's kind of funny. There was a time when Navy would not have wanted that, because when you are a service academy, everyone kind of lumps you as being all together, and so you value the things that make you unique. And being in the American was uniquely Navy, and I think they appreciated that. And plus, there's some on-field considerations. One of the advantages of being an option offense is that most teams don't see it. But if you put three option offenses in the conference, everyone's going to be preparing for it and spend a lot more time focusing on it. Which
Great point.
I don't think. I think a lot of those other teams don't want to spend that much time focusing on the option, because it's so unlike everything that they're going to prepare for otherwise. But and you kind of touched on this. You bring all three into one conference. The situation in college football right now is that you got to have a hook. You got to have a brand. You got to have something you can sell to television. And I think if you can put all three service academies in one conference, that's unique. That's something that other places don't have, that you can sell as having some value. Air Force and Navy, Air Force and Army, when those games are played on CBS. That are other intra-conference games in the American getting on CBS? I don't think so. You gotta find those things that bring value. So I think there's something there. I think it would be a good move if they could make it happen. But with everything being as fluid as it is right now, who knows? But I think it's good for the conference to be proactive, to say, look, this is what we're doing to try to bring value. Let's see what we can make it happen, because I mean, as you know, the ball is really in Memphis's court. Memphis has to make the decision what's best for them, and trying to sweeten the part on the American side. Whether that works or not, at least they're doing something proactive.
Agreed 100%. And I mean, I haven't really just vocally given my thoughts on the Pac-12, but I guess I can now since you brought it up. I don't think Memphis needs to make that move. In my opinion, it's a lateral at best decision. I think that if you stay with the American, you continue to play on the ESPN networks. You have a secure media deal in place versus a Pac-12 that has no idea what they're going to be on, whether that's CW, Cartoon Network, or Nickelodeon for that matter. So I think when you look at Memphis, and I mean, think about it. If you're Memphis and you win, or anyone in the American for that matter, if you win the conference, you are going to the playoff from a football perspective. But Mike, I do want to say this when it comes to that. I think what a lot of people and some Memphis fans are forgetting is it's about more than just the football program. Yes, I understand that's the money driven, that's what everything drives, but it's about the whole campus. You've got to think about travel for the entire campus. Do you really want to go play in Corvallis where there's not a direct flight ever into that place? Do you really want to go play soccer out there on frozen grounds? I mean, it's you know what I mean, Mike. I mean, I just think Memphis has become a staple of the American, and I'll be honest with you, I think the American should value Memphis. Would you agree?
Yeah, I agree, and actually, I think that's what Tim Pernetti, the point he was making on his recent visit was that yeah, we need Memphis to be successful. They're kind of the flagship uh, athletic department of the conference right now. I'm sympathetic to the Memphis situation because I think historically, if you're looking at Memphis historical rivals, they're used to playing schools like Louisville and Cincinnati and all these programs that have moved on, and so they're kind of the last one left. And particularly in basketball, I think if they could, if the Pac-12 could invite Gonzaga, if they could, they have San Diego State, if they invited UNLV, I think in a basketball situation, that might be something that Memphis might relish, even if it's not the traditional rivals. It might be something, but the flip side of that is that travel becomes enormous. And like you said, going to Pullman and Corvallis, and trying to send the volleyball team out there on a Tuesday night, that's really difficult. And I am skeptical of the Pac-12's media, what they're saying they're going to get. They're trying to project 12 to 15 million, but that's vaporware. No one knows where that number's coming from. I don't.
Hundred
I think
percent,
you'd
hundred
have to.
percent.
You'd have to. That's a hard sell. And plus, they're also talking about um, that that they're asking for a grant of rights agreement to lock schools into that conference. And I think
Hmm.
for Memphis, that might be a deal breaker because the real goal for Memphis would be to get in to either the Big 12 or the ACC if something blows up down the road. And if you sign a grant of rights and you're going to end up in the same kind of situation that Florida State and Clemson are in, trying to lawyer your way out of it, that is an expensive and time consuming process if it's possible at all. And I think that, do you take this because it's better now and sacrifice the long term dream? And that's even assuming that it is better, which I'm not sure that it is. I think it's when it comes to the American, I think there's a lot of frustration because it's not the Big 12, and I think there's kind of an idea where, well, we know we don't like where we are. Let's move on, and the grass is greener on the other side. Um, I can understand that, but I'm not sure that's really the case. And I think the decision is more difficult than I think a lot of fans realize.
Well, Mike, you just nailed that right on the head, my man. I mean, I couldn't have said that any better myself. So Mike James joins us here on the Sports Buffet, talking Navy, talking Army Navy. Mike, when you look at this Navy football program, every single year I watch the Army Navy game. Every year, it's a game I watch. It's a game that's on my bucket list as someone to cover and be there. I would assume, obviously, you've been to this game. Um, What's it like? I mean, as someone who covers Navy and who is just inundated in the program, what does that game really feel like?
It's incredible. And there are some people who say, oh, it's not the best football, whatever. The thing we like about sports is the drama. It's having something on the line. And there is nothing more dramatic than the Army Navy game. And I say this as a compliment. It's like the soccer of football games. And if you watch soccer, you might not be entertained by, it's low scoring, maybe, but every play is something might happen. The game can turn on one play, and so it is extremely tense. It's extremely dramatic. You watch it, and I watch it every year, and I hurt my funny bone because I'm gripping the sides of my chair so hard. It's very it's until you have been there, and well, I'll put it this way: anyone who might be skeptical about it, they no longer are as soon as they go. There's a reason why as soon as game day went there once, now they go every year, because when you see what it's like, it's like unlike anything else. I know everyone loves their rivalries, and everyone who loves their rivalries is right. Whatever rivalry is good for your school, that's good. But the feeling of fighting, you're not just fighting a football game, it's like you're arguing over a way of life, and it's on the line based on the result of this game. It's something that until you experience it, you really have no idea.
Well, it is one that is on my list. I'm gonna get there. I don't care how I have to do it. I got to get there. I've got to witness that game. Let me ask you this: would you rather be in the stands as a fan or be in the press box covering it?
That's an interesting question. Well, now that it's in the second weekend of December, the press box certainly has a little bit of help from when it comes to the weather. But
That's true.
I think if for to truly experience the game, you need to be in the stands. Now, I've experienced the game dozens of times at this point, so I like when to be in the press box and to kind of see how other people are reacting. There's a lot more national media there than there is at the typical Navy game. So to kind of see how this program gets perceived across the board is something unique, and I appreciate that. But if you truly want to get a sense of the game, you have to be in the stands, and preferably as close to the cadets or the midshipmen as you can get.
Well, you answered my next question. That's what I was about to ask: is if you're in the stands, where do you want to sit? So, can you give more detail as to why, as a fan, why would you want to sit as close to those members as you can?
Well, that's just where the source of the energy around the game is. If you go around any section, you're going to have a mix of Army and Navy guys, and there'll be some John back and forth, and it'll be a good time. But the true energy, of like the seniors who desperately want to go out with a win. Just the spirit of the game comes from there, and you hear what they're chanting, you see them jumping up and down, you can feed off that energy, and it's something. Now the seats are usually not as good because they stick them in the end zone, but that means when they goes around the corner, you'll probably have a seat on the 30-yard line or so you'll get a good enough view of the game. You'll get the energy of the students, and it makes for a fun experience.
Do you like the game being played where it is right now, or do you prefer it to be back on campuses?
So definitely not on campus.
Said not on campus. Okay.
Yeah, in the COVID year they played at West Point, and it stunk. It's just not the same. Now there was a lot of factors going into that, but
True.
So in general, Philadelphia is the home, and I think it's better to have it in one place, like Philadelphia. It's like, would you move the Rose Bowl to a different city? No,
True.
there's value in the game being identified with a place right now. But this year, it's going to be at FedEx Field. Last year was in New England. They're in the current cycle, they're moving it around a little bit because cities want to host it. And I can understand why they want to, but one of the problems is that, like, Orlando put in a bid to host the game, but one of the problems is that if you want to host the game, you also have to pay for 8,000 cadets and midshipmen to make the trip and to put them up in a hotel for the weekend, and no promoter really wants to do that. So there's a reason why it stays in the general area where it is. I think the game benefits from being associated with a place. I think it's good for Philadelphia and for the game. I understand why they want to move it around a little bit, but I would prefer to keep it in Philadelphia more years than not.
Mike, just a couple of questions for you before we let you get out of here, man. Thank you once again. Thank you very much for coming on and talking. This has been an incredible discussion. Mike, when you look at Navy, you just talked about it. You talked about the national optics of this football program. As someone who covers them specifically, what are your thoughts on how not just Navy, but maybe all the service academies are perceived from a national perspective, and how do you think that that can be improved?
I think for on a national scale, I think there aren't service academies kind of are a little misunderstood. Um, it can be challenging to explain, what service academy concerns are. The biggest concern right now, I think, across all of the service academies is just with the changes that are being made in college football across the board. You look at NIL, service academies can't participate in that. You look at the transfer portal, service academies can't participate in that. You look at conference realignment, and it feels like service academies are getting pushed out the door. And even things like rule changes in the game. So they had changes to cut blocking rules that now have outlawed, blocking below the waist on the perimeter. All these changes, it almost feels like it's being it's service academies are being specifically targeted. And it can be a little frustrating. So there's no real national voice to kind of present service academy concerns in the media. I think John Feinstein has served that purpose for a while. But even he, I disagree with a lot of the things that he says, but he at least cares about the service academies. Whereas I think a lot of, there's such a rush in general to kind of move to isolate where the only things that matter are the Power Four and eventually the Power Two, and anything outside of that is just kind of noise. And I think when you look at why service academies play Division I football, it's so people become familiar with them. They use it as a recruiting tool, not for the team, but for the school in general. Because people, you assume, we're sports fans. We know Army, Navy, Air Force, but the general public doesn't necessarily they're not even aware of the service academies, and the way they get that kind of general awareness is through their football programs. So when you see them getting squeezed out of the national conversation, that hurts the school. The school has a mission to put officers into the ranks every year. So it's vital for the service academies to do what they can to stay in the spotlight as much as possible, to make, and that's a big reason why Navy joined the American, is for games like the one they're playing against Memphis tomorrow. It's two undefeated teams. Memphis is a basically a playoff contender. This game has a little juice to it, and it's going to get a little bit of recognition in the country, which means Navy gets some recognition. Being able to play games like that is vital to the service academies, to keep them in the spotlight. And I think that's the biggest concern for them as college football changes going forward.
All right, Mike. So I said two more questions, but that was an incredible answer. Sorry. So I have to add one more, and then I'll get to my last. And my last one is just 3 keys on how Navy can defeat Memphis. But before we get to that point, what does it mean to you to cover guys? Because it's different at this service academies. You're not covering someone who's going to go necessarily play at the next level, NFL, NBA, whatever. They're going to play at a level that a very select few will ever even dream of. And then no telling what can happen in their future. What does it mean to cover these guys and then see how they grow as a college athlete, but then they're also growing inside these service academies?
That's one of the things I love the most about covering these guys is you get to know them a little bit. You interview them as their recruits, and you see, they're not necessarily sure what the Naval Academy is, but they like the opportunity it presents, and so they're willing to give it a shot. And then you see how they grow over 4 years, to being people ready to go out into the Navy, ready to go out into the Marine Corps, ready to go out into the world. And you see what the place does to people and how it changes people and the kind of people that they become. And it's just incredible. And it's especially when you look at the background that some of these guys come from, some of them come from hard backgrounds. And when you see when they go to a place like the Naval Academy, it can change the course of their family for generations. They come from a hard background, but they get into the Naval Academy, they're set on into a career, and it lets them truly show the caliber of person that they are, and then to leverage that into creating something for their families and their careers. And it's just it is by far the best thing about covering this program.
Man, what an incredible answer. All right, Mike. So the midshipmen, you already know this. You already know this information. I'm just telling my fans. The midshipmen have won their last 70 home games when leading after the third quarter, a streak that goes back to 1999 and is the longest active streak nationally. When you look at Memphis and them leading after the third quarter, I think Sofield's like 26 and something too. He's really good. What are three keys? That's a big key to me, is having the lead going into that fourth quarter. But what are three keys to you for this Navy team to knock off a really good Tiger team?
So when you look at that stat, there's a reason for that. And the reason people talk a lot about getting a fast start on Navy and they won't be able to catch up. That's not the case. It's not about getting a fast start, because as long as they have the chance to run their offense, they'll keep running their offense. It's actually the opposite is true, is because Navy plays such a ball control, eat the clock kind of offense. It's actually harder for teams to come back on Navy than it is for Navy to come back on them, because you just don't have the same number of opportunities. So I think that's the first thing that needs to happen, is Navy has to control the clock. So one of the things about the offense so far this season is that Navy scored 12 touchdowns this season in 2 games, and a third of those have come on one play drives. That's going to be hard against Memphis, because Memphis is playing so much better defensively this season. Navy's going to have to be able to get those 10, 12 play drives that eat up the clock. They're going to have to get the 3 yards that the defense gives them and just execute at a point where they can sustain that over the course of a drive. So number one is control the clock. Number two is they're going to have to get to Hennigan somehow, and make him feel that presence. That's a lot easier said than done. I think what you're going to end up seeing is maybe a lot of simulated pressure where they'll show 6, 7 guys at the line, then back, pick and choose which ones back up, try to confuse the offensive line a little bit, maybe. But that's going to be, that's going to be defensively. You can't let him get too comfortable, because he will pick any defense apart. And then number 3, I think Navy needs to have some surprises. They played 2 games. They played Bucknell and Temple. They kept things very simple against those teams because they could. I think that they were saving a lot for this game specifically. I think they want to have some surprises for Memphis and catch them off guard on a couple things. So I think, now is the time. We have not seen the offense's final form, and now is the time to kind of unlock that a little bit. So, excuse me. So I think those are the 3 things. Get to Hennigan, have some surprises, and be able to eat the clock.
3 great things. And who would have thought that Army and Navy would be sitting at the top of the American right now at both 1-0? I wouldn't have thought that going in. I mean, and that's nothing against either team. I wouldn't.
Well, it's certainly not what you would expect, but yeah, I think it's good. Memphis is really the kind of the flagship athletic department, but as far as national brands go, Army and Navy are up there. I think they're recognizable, and it's good when your recognizable teams are making noise, because then people want to watch. So I think it's a good thing. It may or may not last, but even to have that up there, I think is good for the league.
Most definitely. Most definitely. Mike James is joining us to talk Navy football. And Mike, thank you very much for coming on, man. Very insightful. And we'd love to get you back on and talk Navy some more as the season goes.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Mike James joined us to talk a little Navy football. Now let's move over to the American Athletic Conference slate of games. Speaking of Army, they take on Rice tomorrow. Rice will travel over to West Point to take on Army at a noon kickoff. Army series is currently tied right now, 4-4-1. The last meeting was in 2019 that Army won 14-7. That game will be played on CBS Sports Network. We also see Charlotte at Indiana tomorrow on the Big Ten Network. That's an 11 a.m. kickoff, and that is the first meeting between these two teams. Tulane, a little Cajun Bowl tomorrow, as Louisiana takes on Tulane tomorrow. Big time matchup there. Tulane leads this overall series 23-4. They also won the most recent matchup 41-24 in 2018. We also got Utah State at Temple tomorrow. We just talked about it. Memphis Navy. Big time matchup is Miami and South Florida. Will kick off at 6 p.m. over on ESPN. And then Tulsa takes on Louisiana Tech. So big time matchups there over in the American. Now let's jump over and talk a little SEC football as the Southeastern Conference is back up and running this week. When you look at the SEC right now and you look at the standings, Georgia is currently sitting at 1-0. You got LSU sitting at 1-0, Texas A&M. These are all SEC conference records, by the way. SEC conference starting it up now. Georgia 1-0 in conference. They're currently 3-0 overall. LSU is currently 2-1 overall, 1-0 in conference. Texas A&M 2-1. South Carolina also 2-1. Alabama is 3-0. Ole Miss is 3-0. Oklahoma, Tennessee, big time matchup this week, and Texas are all 3-0. Then you got Arkansas, Auburn, big time matchup. We'll talk about it in just a second. And Vanderbilt all come in at 2-1, and then Mississippi State, Florida, and Kentucky all come in at 1-2. Kentucky is 0-2 in conference play right now in the Southeastern Conference. You look at the weekend slate of games, big time. It all starts tomorrow morning, 11 a.m. ESPN, as the 1-2 Florida Gators travel over to Starkville, Mississippi to take on the Mississippi State Bulldogs. Florida leads the overall series 34-19-2. The last game at Starkville was a Florida win 13-6 in 2018. A game that I do want to look at as in a little more depth from a statistical standpoint is this Florida Mississippi State matchup. When you look at these two teams, last week Texas A&M would defeat Florida 33-20. Last week Toledo would go in and completely rocket Mississippi State 41-17. The overall is 34-19-2 series lead for Florida. Both of these teams cannot run the football, and that's not me being mean. That's me just saying 119 teams, 119 yards per game. That's 102nd in the country. Mississippi State is 97.7. It's 114 in the country. Passing offenses are a little bit better. Florida averages 279 per game. It's 39th in the country. And Mississippi State averages 278, and that is 43rd in the country. Offensively, both these teams are in the top 100. Mississippi State comes in at 82nd at 357.7 or 375.7, and Florida comes in at 72nd. That's 398th. That's a big time, very interesting matchup. I think obviously, if you're Billy Napier, you're begging for a win right now in that game. Begging for a win. The other big game I want to take a look at is going to be at 2:30. It's on ESPN. It's down in the Plains. It's Auburn and Arkansas. Auburn leads the overall series 20-12-1. when you look at these two games, obviously Arkansas, if you if you listen to some podcasts and you read some social media posts, you'd think Arkansas lost that game by 40 points against UAB, but they didn't. They won 37-27. So, there's that. And then Auburn would defeat New Mexico 45-19. When you look at these two teams, Arkansas really, really, really strong offensively. Number 5 in the country offense right now, 507 yards per game, 328 through the air, which is ranked 12th. 259 on the ground, which is ranked 11th. We look at scoring offense, they're averaging 46 points a game. That's 11th in the country. Rushing defense is absolutely incredible. They're averaging 61.7 yards a game. That is 7th in the nation. And they can score. They're averaging 22 points per game defensively. When you look at this Arkansas team, offense can move the ball, offense can score. I understand people are saying Taylor Green's not it. Let's hold up a minute. Let's let this kid play. They've played 3 games. 3 games have been played. I don't understand the overreaction to everything that happens, not just with this Arkansas team in specifically, but all around the country. It the overreaction of fans now is just laughable to me. But a lot. It changes a whole lot. And I think Arkansas can do it. I think Arkansas goes into Auburn tomorrow afternoon and gets a win. I think the Hogs come out 3-1. Do I think it's easy? No, it's Hugh Freeze. Now, quarterback is an issue right now down in the Plains. What's going to happen there? We don't know. But dog gets the win. Now, obviously, the game of the night, game day's there tomorrow. Tennessee, Oklahoma. The prodigal son, Josh Heupel. Oklahoma leads the overall series 3-1. Tennessee right now is the 3rd overall rushing offense in the country with 336 yards a game. They're averaging 639 total offense, 303 through the air, 336 on the ground. They're the number 1 scoring offense in the country at 63.7 points a game. When you look at it on the flip side, Oklahoma's only scoring 33 points a game. That's 49th in the nation. Defensively, Tennessee is just as good. We talked to Josh Heupel about it on the SEC weekly call last week, and Heupel told us, quote, "It will be a staple of Tennessee to be strong defensively." He didn't say, "I have a plan, it's a thought, or it's a goal." He said, "It is." So, Heupel and Tennessee are a team to look out for. We've been saying it all season. They're they're not really a sleeper in the league per se. Tennessee, Ole Miss, these teams are playoff type teams. LSU, UCLA, obviously UCLA leads the overall series 1-0 after a big win last year in khaki shorts against khaki shorts Chip Kelly. It's a big time game. That's going to be a fun one on ABC. You got Missouri, Vanderbilt. Both teams, Vanderbilt's coming in 2-1. Do I think Vanderbilt beats Missouri? No, I don't. But I think it's close. I think Vanderbilt gives them all they want. But a very, very interesting slate of games. You've got Texas A&M and Bowling Green. You've got South Carolina and Akron. You've got Ole Miss and Georgia Southern. And then we see the debut of Arch Manning as a starter as Texas takes on Louisiana Monroe. Big time stuff in the SEC. And I tell you, this conference is obviously stout. You can say what you want. It's probably right now, currently, SEC's non-conference schedule or non-conference records 32-8. They face 5 teams in the American. They're 5-0. Since 1995, they're 58-38 against teams in the American Conference. Non-FBS since 1995, the SEC is 248-5. That's wild. 248-5. The only teams they've lost have been to 2 games to the to the ACC, 1 game to the Big 10, 2 games to the Big 12, 1 to the MAC, and 1 to the Sun Belt, and 1 to an FBS independent. So when you look at this SEC conference, I mean, these guys are really good. They're really strong. They're the best of the best. They're the cream of the crop, however you want to look at it. But when you look over the last 5 years and you go look at these programs, I think it tells you really a lot. But when you look at it on the last 10 years, it tells you even more. From 2015 to 2024, okay? This is what I want to go over. When I was talking about overreaction a minute ago, this is why I made the comment. Fans overreact about a football program that over the last 10 years is 48-65, has been to 5. I'm talking about Arkansas, by the way. They have a 42% winning record over the last 10 years. The only team worse than them over the last 10 years is Vanderbilt. I don't understand the whole. Yeah, Hunter Yurichek's asking for money for the NIL. He is. Is he using Ole Miss as an example? He is. Mississippi State just got an $8 million donation to their football program. The NIL goes all the way across campus, people. With the Arkansas Edge, you can literally go in there and check and say, hey, I want my money to go to this program. So all the screaming and all the Hunter Yurichek's doing the same thing every athletic director across the country is doing, folks. That's what an athletic director does. That's his role. So you can't come after the guy. It makes no sense. Why attack him? He's being honest. You can't fault the man for giving facts. Can't do it. You can, but you're wasting time. I don't. I mean, yeah, I don't get it. I don't understand it. I mean, you're 2-1 right now. If you're in Fayetteville, Arkansas, you're 2-1. Enjoy you got a big game in conference this week on the road to go get a win. Then you're 3-1 and 1-0 in conference. You've still got Louisiana Tech left on the schedule. You've got a struggling Mississippi State team. There's 6-7 wins here, people. I don't understand this. This team's terrible. Oh, it's all sunshine pump. It's because those people are looking at it from a statistical and from an actual analytical standpoint. They're not looking at it from woe is us. We're the worst team in the SEC. No, you're not. No, you're not. What you're hoping for is that they'll fire Sam Pittman and make Bobby Petrino the head coach. And we've talked about this a few times now. Looking at the stats, it's not going to happen. Because guess what? Looking at the stats, you're going to continue to win games. It's almost like some fans don't even want this program to win. They're so hell-bent and bound on this program sucking so that they can complain that they can't even see that there's been major improvements within the program. And they're effective. You don't believe me? Look at the stats. They're effective. What happened last week against UAB? I'll tell you what happened. Trent Dilfer came in with a hell of a game plan. And don't sleep on UAB, the Blazers. So I don't understand this whole let's, we got to get Sam out of here. Sam's the worst thing going. It makes no sense. It makes no sense. It's dumb. It's stupid. It's stupid. All right. Let's jump over. I'll tell you what. Let's just take a quick break right quick. When we come back, we're going to talk a little MLB as we would see some wild stuff happen last night out in Florida as a little 50-50 action. And no, I'm not talking about the Bet Saracen and Oakland deal. I'm talking about a certain player that man, he's a heck of a ball player, and he made a hell of a record last night that we're going to get into pretty deep here. Real quick. We'll be right back right here on the 4-Star Sports Media Network. Welcome back, folks. Welcome back to 4-Star Sports Media. Welcome back to the Sports Buffet. And who knew that you could listen to a podcast and then go back and you can just, during our breaks, you can just crank your stereo up and listen to some incredible beats. We will take a look now at the MLB as we would see Shohei Ohtani last night get 50-50 as he would become postseason let's be the postseason being right around the corner. We are now less than 2 weeks away. Brewers have currently clinched the NL Central as they did that on Wednesday, but have not yet clinched their playoff seed. The Chicago Cubs 5-3 postseason spot with their 2-1 victory over the Mariners in extra innings. The Yankees have not yet secured the East Division title or their postseason seed. On Thursday, the Guardians clinched their ticket to October with a 3-2 walk-off victory against the Twins in the 10th inning. They have not yet secured their AL Central title, or Dodgers, who we're going to talk about here shortly, clinched their 12th postseason appearance with a 20-4, yes, 20-4 victory last night over the Marlins. We would see Shohei Ohtani deliver an absolutely historic performance to seal the first 50-50 season in MLB history. We'll talk about that more in detail here in just a minute. All right, so let's see who can clinch next. Who is next to clinch if you're in the MLB? The Phillies and Orioles each have at least 99% chance of reaching the postseason, according to Fangraphs. The Astros, Royals, and Padres are above 89%. The Diamondbacks, Twins, and Mets have the postseason in sight, but still have a ways to go to get there. After statistically securing their postseason spots, the Phillies, Dodgers, Guardians, Astros, and Yankees are all positioned to win their divisions, assuming their current lead holds. The Phillies, Yankees, Dodgers, and Guardians are all in line to earn buys through the wild card round as well. So let's take a look at what's still up for grabs Once a team clinches its ticket to the postseason, there's still a lot to play for, folks. We can't forget that most of the division leads are comfortable, but teams can be battling for playoff positioning until the final weekend of the season. The number 1 seed, number 2 seeds in each league will go to the division winners with the best 2 records, right? So these 2 teams will earn a bye through the playoff round, will host and have the host rights in the divisional series. The number 3 seed will go to the 3rd division winner, and that team will host a 3-game wild card series against the number 6 team, which will go to the 3rd wild card team. Did y'all get that? Okay. The top wild card team will be the 4th seed and hosting duties against the 5 seed in the wild card round. The highest seed also will get home field advantage in the championship series once we get to that point. So let's look at the bracket. If it were to stop today, the season ended today, we'll go look at the bracket as it is. And yes, White Sox fans, you're not in there, as you know. So let's look at the American League. So the wild card would be the number 6 Minnesota Twins. They would take on the number 3 Houston Astros. So the wild card winner would play the Cleveland Guardians, and then wild card number 5 would be Kansas City versus wild card number 4 in Baltimore, and then the ALDS winner would play the New York Yankees. When you look at it on the National League side of things, the wild card would be number 6 Arizona Diamondbacks versus number 3 versus the LA Dodgers, and on the other side, the wild card would be the number 5 New York Mets versus the number 4 San Diego Padres. The NLDS would be the wild card winner versus the Philadelphia Phillies. So, in addition to all this, we've got some tiebreakers that could possibly come into effect. So let's go ahead and look over some of these. Okay, so the Yankees have clinched a tiebreaker against the Guardians. The Guardians have clinched a tiebreaker. The Mets have clinched tiebreakers against both the Padres and the Diamondbacks. The Orioles currently hold the tiebreaker against the Yankees with 3 games left to play. The D-backs hold the tiebreaker against the Padres with 3 games left to play as well. The Mets also hold the tiebreaker against the Braves with 3 games left to play. So, wildcard series will get started on October 1st. 1st, 2nd, 3rd will be the wildcard series, and the division will start on the 5th, go 5th, 7th, 9th, and then 10th and 12th if necessary. Divisional series will be the October 5th, 6th, 8th, 9th in the National League as well. So a lot of fun. Now let's go back and let's take a look at what was some wild stuff last night, as we would see Shohei Ohtani deliver incredible performance last night. Absolutely incredible performance last night. If you didn't watch it, you may want to go back and do it. So it becomes the first player, or no player had posted more than 42 home runs and 42 stolen bases in its century plus history. So he hit his 49th, 50, and 50 home runs, and then he would steal his 50th and 51st base all in the same game, as he would go 6 for 6 with 3 home runs, 2 doubles, 2 steals, 4 runs. He would say through his interpreter, "I'm equally ecstatic with both experiences I had. The biggest thing for me was being able to finally achieve a dream of playing in a postseason game." This man got a curtain call on the road with the homer that got him the 50-50. incredible stuff, man. Incredible stuff. Dave Roberts, after the game, would raise a glass of champagne and say, quote, Shohei, cheers to you on something really spectacular, man. Congratulations. He's doing all this in a season in which he isn't going to he isn't doing what he made the intentional throwing arm is still in the mend after undergoing a major UCL surgery on September 19th of last season. 1 year later to the date, he posted one of the best offensive games ever. So, when you sit back and think about that, incredible stuff. Absolutely incredible stuff from Shohei Ohtani. And I mean, just fun stuff. All right, folks, let's go ahead and close it out. You've been watching and listening to the Sports Buffet right here on a Friday morning. We appreciate everybody watching and listening. We appreciate Mike James coming on and talking some Navy football, as that's a big-time matchup. Big-time matchup tomorrow in the American. But for all of us here at 4 Star Sports Media, I am Wes Pruitt. Have a good evening, and as always, folks, stay classy.